What's going on, guys? Happy Saturday. It's Saturday, January 21st, 11 o'clock in the morning. We've been previewing this Bills-Bengals matchup all week. We've heard so many different narratives and stories, and all the work's done, guys. And so I figured that I bring everyone together here, some from the network, some from outside the network, but still our good friends, to talk a little Bills-Bengals matchup. Have it, a little loose, more of a roundtable discussion, and have you guys drive the show. So you viewers and listeners, be sure to shoot your topics in the chat room. I'm going to start with Greg Thompson from Covering Buffalo. Good morning, Greg. How you feeling, brother?
I can't wait for kickoff to get here. Like this week has been so exhausting. Like we've nitpicked every possible thing, all the talking heads all over the place, and I just want the game to get here. I'm so ready for this game to start, to just watch the game happen, because it's going to be an awesome game. I'm excited to talk about it, but I am very much done with the analysis. It's hurting my brain.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And obviously, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, it's a quarterback league, right? It's going to be a big game, hopefully a shootout. So we had to bring in our resident quarterback, Mr. Nate Geary. Nate, what's going on, brother? Good to see you again, man.
Just warming up my arm. I'm well, fellas. I'm well. Same with me as Greg. It's funny. All week, the quotes, right? Joe Mixon, who has, seems like the perpetual talker for the Bengals, and everyone's looking for that extra little motivation, that extra chip on their shoulder this week. I assure you, no team, none of the actual players need extra chips on their shoulder. They are all ready to go. That is something we'll do and we'll talk about and we'll prognosticate about. But to Greg's point, I'm ready for action.
Yeah, they've been running their mouths a lot, giving the Bills some bulletin board material. And speaking of running, Ryan Sullivan from the Cover One team, one of our writers on the website, put up an article today on Khalil Shakir and the slot position. Ryan, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us on the roundtable.
Yeah, glad to be here. I'm glad this worked out.
Absolutely. So I want to start off. We're going to start all things firing on offense. We're going to start with the Bills offense. And as I just said about Ryan, he put an article about who should be starting in the slot position. So, Ryan, I'm going to throw it to you first. Obviously, the Bills have, for the most part, most of their wide receivers available in this game, which begs the question, who's gonna be, benched or sat for this game, scratched for this game. And a lot of that has to do with that slot position. So I want to get your thoughts on that slot position, who you believe should be getting a lot of those reps there.
Well, it's tough because it's so hard to make a switch this deep into the playoffs, to all of a sudden go to a rookie you haven't used before. But we used Shakir, or the Bills used Shakir last weekend, and you saw what he brings that's different than Isaiah McKenzie. He brings, his route, his distribution of where he's been targeted in a couple games that he's been the primary slot receiver between Pittsburgh and last week. He's been able to get deep, which isn't something we've seen out of the slot a ton from McKenzie over his few years here. Physically, he's a super similar guy in terms of speed. And I know we don't do speed based on the 40 times, but they got similar 40 times, similar splits, like super similar guys in terms of speed that they bring out of the slot. And, he doesn't do, at least we haven't seen him being used in the preseason as, some of the gadget stuff that McKenzie does. But in 2 games where he's been the 70%, 80% slot guy, he's had a lot of flash plays. And it's just been really interesting to see, because we often get, especially this year between Elam and Shakir, they've been hesitant to go to the rookies for one reason or another. We haven't really been able to put our finger on it. But, I think it would be a really good spot to go to Shakir in this game because, there isn't a ton of tape on him. So maybe this.
Wow, we lost you. We're losing some of your audio there. No, those are all valid points. And that's why it's such an interesting discussion when we're talking, who should be dressed and who shouldn't, right, guys? Because each of them have their own little skill sets. Each of them, some of them are good versus man, some versus zone. Some have been in the league longer, so they can recognize when a blitz is coming. And that's obviously really important. And Matt, we appreciate the super chat. He says, really appreciate all the work you guys put in this week to provide more context around those narratives with both film and stats. That's what I love. That's been like the most fun part about all this talk this week. Like, yes, we don't like all these narratives because more times than not, these narratives, especially for mainstream guys, they're on one end or the other, right? Like there's no middle ground. And so having the film, having the stats, guys on the network that like doing both, we can kind of add that balance to the discussion. And so Greg, I'll shoot this one to you, man. Who do you believe you're the roster guy. You're really good at predicting those things. Who do you think is going to be scratched at the wide receiver position? And, the guys that are playing, what are their roles going to be?
So I think that there's two questions here in the chat that are really at the heart of it. So Danielle asking, did they dress all six? Roy here listing out the five that I think are super likely. So I think obviously Diggs, Davis, Shakir, Beasley, McKenzie, the practice reports and everything that's out there. I think even Adam Schefter tweeted about Isaiah McKenzie, which was kind of interesting. That gives you an indication that all those guys are ready to go. I'll be quite surprised if any of those guys are a healthy scratch, because all five are on the active roster now. So Beasley would need to be a healthy scratch in order to sit, and McKenzie would need to be that they're not quite ready on the hamstring. I will say there's enough out there that I would rather see, I'd rather see a ninth defensive lineman brought up to keep rotating than a sixth receiver. I just don't know that there's enough. We needed Smoke Brown in the moment. We needed that when we got really thin there and barely had four active receivers. I'd be quite surprised if we used one of those elevations and one of the game day actives on John Brown when the other five, you've talked about it here in Ryan's article, touched on that, Shakir can't do both John Brown and Isaiah McKenzie because he doesn't have that short-term, the quickness that McKenzie has, but he can do the John Brown part. And then you have Beasley. So like you have enough of that coverage in the other areas that my guess is going to be five receivers. I actually think we might see an extra D tackle in case something happens to Phillips during the game, or Kingsley Jonathan as the ninth guy just to rotate in to let Basham play more D tackle and to have another guy out there. And even I think, Jonathan could kick into inside. So my guess is if we see an elevation, this is one of the first weeks in forever, we might not need a practice squad elevation. They might do it as a courtesy to give a guy a game day check, but I would expect it to be the five with Diggs, Davis, Shakir, Beasley, McKenzie, to leave Brown on the practice squad. And if we see an elevation, I'm going to expect it from the defensive line.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I think that those are the five I believe that will play. And it's interesting because Lou Anarumo, I'm going to get his name right, DC for the Bengals, he's pretty talented and he's very balanced. And he's probably looking at that Dolphins film and saying, man, they blitzed a good amount, got some good pressure on Josh Allen. But they also got pressure with four as well. And I think, three of their sacks came with four-man rushes. But I'll pose this question to you, Nate. The Bills, when teams do blitz them, whether it's 5 or 6 man pressures, we saw some cover zero looks in that game versus the Dolphins, obviously. Their outlet is the most important player in this game, and when teams bring that pressure, right? And for many years, that guy was Cole Beasley in the slot. And, for this season, especially when Cole wasn't there, the outlet for those hot routes, those sight adjustments has been the running backs. And so that balance between who your hot route or sight adjustment is going to be in this game when the Bengals do bring blitz, because they're going to bring the blitz. Obviously, it worked for a decent amount of that game versus the Dolphins. Who are they going to go to? Is Beasley going to be that guy? Because he has been for many years. Is the running back going to get back involved? Because what the Dolphins did on film is they brought that extra defender and forced that running back to stay in. Devin Singletary had 8 blocks and pass blocking. So he was kept in. James Cook had a couple reps there. Hines even had to stay in a few times. So that outlet was kind of taken away, almost like Bill Belichick did to Marshall Faulk years ago. You know what? We don't want him in a route. We don't want him to be an outlet. We want him blocking. So how does that affect the slot position, Cole Beasley, Shakir, and just that balance between the running back and slot position?
I think it's a really interesting aspect of what this offense is and why. And people might kind of roll their eyes at this. It makes them hard to prepare for because you don't know if you're Lou Amarillo. You don't know if you bring a blitz, you're not exactly sure what the answer to that blitz is going to mean, right? A plus B, and putting together the other side of the equal sign can't be the easiest when you've got guys that the Bills are willing to use, but not sure if they will. And I think the conversation around, will they dress 5, will they dress 6 is way less interesting than who actually gets those slot snaps, because I look at this point, and I've been kind of an Isaiah McKenzie defender for a lot of the season. He was, you guys were at training camp. He was the best player in August. He was the best player on offense in August. I thought that not only was the role going to be consistent, but that it would continually evolve throughout the year. And it early on, it kind of manifested, but then it started to scale back, and we started to see some of the things that we all maybe looked at Isaiah McKenzie and said, well, we really need more. We need more. We need more. And a lot of those things kind of reared their ugly head again, and really culminating to the end of the season, he gets injured. And I think this is the same conversation we're having on the other side of the football with Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam is, do the Bills, does Sean McDermott, does Leslie Frazier, does Ken Dorsey, do they believe in the system and the process enough to believe their eyes and use what they're seeing each and every day? We don't know what happens at practice, guys. And that's the hardest part about projecting and predicting what they're going to do on a game day. But the player that I want to maybe highlight in this, Eric, and what makes maybe Isaiah McKenzie's role even more diminished is someone you mentioned, which is Nyheim Hines. They use him a lot in the same type of role they've traditionally used Isaiah McKenzie. Now, this is not the same. Correct. This is not the same offense as Brian Daboll. You're not seeing a lot of jet sweeps. You're not seeing a lot of east-west stretching defenses horizontally. But that could change this week. I know you were mentioning like this is a team that really just does not use the screen pass very often, but maybe this is the week they start to use it.
They better have some answers. They better have that in the tool belt this week.
Because what you want to do is obviously you want to try to get Stephon Diggs and Eli Apple as much as you possibly can. But the other thing you want to do with Eli Apple is force him to become a defender, force him to tackle, to become a physical player. And I was talking about this with yards per pass. The wide receivers this year have been incredibly disappointing in terms of blocking. Gabe Davis and nobody else really brings a whole lot of juice to the blocking game. So for me, guys, I think this could be the week you see more Nyheim Hines in the pass game, but teams have been daring Josh Allen to dump the ball down to the running backs, and this is not week 4 or week 3 where Josh targeted Devin Singletary 9 times. We have not seen it, even though teams are willing to give it. Teams are giving it. It's time for Josh Allen to take it, because that's the kind of stuff that does open up those deep shots down the field, especially when teams are willing to give it to Josh. And right now, he hasn't really been super willing to take it.
So I have a quick question for you, Eric, off of what Nate said there is, do you think it's a real thing that a professional play caller and a guy like Ken Dorsey and the system and setup with Josh Allen, do you think they really do keep things in their pocket until matchups like this? Like, is that or is it little,
this question comes up a lot.
Yeah. Like, is that a real thing? Or because I'll use the one example, the KC game, we did see the percentage of Reggie Gilliam. We saw the usage of more 12 and 21.
But why?
So that's what I'm wondering. Is it that, hey, there'll be some little tweaks that we see this game, but there's not like people think of like the water boy and like there's the secret green notebook and like, oh, we're going to use the good plays now. Help people understand maybe where some of that can be. Yes, we might see little tweaks, little wrinkles, but it's not like they have like the secret plays they haven't broke out yet.
Okay, I'll start with what you led out with. You just were talking about that Chiefs game and how they went to more Gilliam and those heavy personnel groupings. That's how teams were attacking the Chiefs. The Chiefs wanted them in that base defense so that they could push the ball down the field, get those explosive plays. So some of it's baked into okay, this is the game plan for the week. This is what they struggle with. For example, according to SIS, most teams are attacking the Bengals with 11 personnel. They're surrendering 7.4 yards per attempt, the 8th highest yards per attempt against 11 personnel, 6.8 yards per covered snap. That's the 5th highest. So I expect a lot of that 11 personnel, which is why we led off with that wide receiver talk and who's going to be playing, where those roles are going to be. But you got to think about it this way. Say you have a 500-page playbook and it has 150 plays diagrammed, all the formations, all the little, minutia that comes with an offense and running an offense, all the way down to how you huddle. All right, so you have 150 plays in your playbook, but you're only bringing half of that, maybe not even half of that, into each game. And that's why your coaches, they map out, hey, first and second and 10 situations, your base offense, you have these plays. Mm-hmm. And they break it down in distance and situations, man versus zone beaters, 1 versus 2 high beaters. Coaches, they diagram it differently on their play call sheet. but you're only coming to that game with sometimes, 70 to 90 plays, right? So you're naturally leaving out some of your plays, but you're going to be running the same base concepts all season. You're not going to come into a game in the most important game of the year in the playoffs, one and done, and start running brand new concepts. Yeah. You're going to package them differently, different personnel groupings with Gilliam, like in that Kansas City game. You're going to use Nyheim Hines as that eye candy, as opposed to Isaiah McKenzie, which they did start to do a little bit in that last quarter of the year with like Detroit, New England, those matchups.
The couple where like Cook and Hines were both on the field.
Yeah, the Patriots game.
The one thing too is, maybe I would tell you this too, Greg, is 2 years ago, this team, without the experience in the playoffs, maybe way more dumbed down version of this. But this is an experienced playoff team who I think understands when they get to the regular season, they might dress that concept the same exact way for 18 straight weeks because they want it on film. Even if it's not successful, they want to continue putting that concept on film. So that way, when you line up in January against a team that you have not played a full game against, and you dress it up in a different way, well, that's how you can create that wrinkle. And so maybe it's not, to Eric's point, maybe it's not they're coming up with new concepts. I promise no coordinators on the sidelines. Joe Brady doesn't have a grease board and he's like, hey, we're going to do it this way.
Have you guys thought about doing this?
That's right. So like that doesn't happen like it happens, in like high school football. But I do think that 2 years ago, this group of coaches, who Ken Dorsey was here, by the way, so I think that's important, is maybe there isn't that experience. Maybe there isn't that willingness to say, hey, we got to keep the Ferrari in the garage. Let's drive the Porsche around, but the Ferrari's staying in the garage until the winter when we're really going to need to pull it out. And I do think there is a layer to that, but I just don't think it's hey, we're running brand new concepts out here.
So Ryan, I talked about 11 personnel and how most teams attack the Bengals in that way, and it kind of plays to your point of the wide receivers, especially Shakir. And I asked Nate about that, when teams bring the blitz, and you're going to expect the Bengals to bring it because that's what has been working recently for the most part. The reason why you brought up Shakir, not only just a deep ball and what he can do in comparison to McKenzie, but as we can see here, according to PFF, Shakir is really good after the catch. And that's not a surprise. We understood that when they being drafted him. But obviously, if the Bills, whether they're facing a blitz or not, if they can give some easy answers, that easy button for Josh Allen, it's, again, on those screen plays, if they can incorporate some more of those, or just some short passing game, quick passing game looks to guys like Shakir, he can get some yards after the catch.
Yeah, he's been, if you were to extrapolate his yards per reception over the course of a qualifying amount of targets, he would be one of the best receivers in the NFL in terms of yards per reception. Obviously, we want to see that play out next year, but he's shown in a super small sample size that he can get upfield super quickly, and he's really talented and he's fast. And, and again, I know you said they don't hold stuff back during the regular season and then they maybe hide stuff, but, again, Khalil Shakir is not a guy that has a ton of tape that you can prepare for. And, maybe, you see him on the field, and, Mike Hilton, who's been great this year, hasn't seen a lot of Khalil Shakir. So he gets the ball in his hands and he hasn't seen how he plays, how he runs, and maybe that's advantage. And, he misses a tackle because he doesn't realize the type of player that Khalil Shakir is.
Right. And, go ahead, Greg. Go.
So a quick example, I want to give credit to Greg Vorse. He's been mentioning this all year, and I think it reinforces what you said, that you might see usage in situations that have been there the whole time, but we haven't pulled the trigger on. And he's been, joking about it forever that we're going to finally see the Bobby Hart touchdown, in that you have him out there all the time. We're used constantly as the extra guy. We've passed out of that. We've seen leak out of that a couple times where it's been really nice. You see the naked bootleg and sometimes it's a keeper for Josh. Sometimes we've had I think a touchdown to Knox and a touchdown to Davis. And on some of those setups that eventually they're going to sneak Bobby Hart out there for one of them. And that's one that a lot of fans will see as, oh, look, they pulled out the trick play. I'm like, right. He's been getting a ton of snaps the whole time. He's been on the field there. And probably, if we go back and look, he's probably released a couple times just to kind of throw it in there.
What's funny, Greg, is you're totally right, because when we interviewed Ryan Bates, he was that extra offensive lineman last year. And he's like, dude, I ran like 7 or 8 routes when I was open, but the ball went somewhere else. I had to run the most routes without getting a target in the league, he joked about. So you're right. There are those type of things that maybe you just didn't see it, upright because the ball went somewhere else and wasn't directly in your face or pointed out for that matter afterwards. But yeah, those things are going to pop up. And that's a really great point. And so let's move on to, I'm going to stay in this receiver talk because one area the Bills can attack, we talked 11 personnel, how they could with the slot position, but the number 2 wide receiver position has been talked about all season, and we're in the playoffs now. And in that first playoff game, playoff Gabe showed up. And if we're looking at some of these Football Outsiders stats here, DVOA stats, Cincinnati is not ranked all that well versus the number 2 receiver of teams. So Nate, I see you shaking your head. What are your thoughts on Gabe Davis's week this week against the Bengals and what he can do as teams? Because the Dolphins did it a bunch. They bracketed Diggs a lot, and that's why things opened up for Gabe and everyone else, really. Shakir, everyone that got those numbers last week in the passing game were thanks to Diggs getting doubled and being bracketed and that vice coverage. So talk about the number 2 position this week, Gabe Davis, and what you expect from him and how the Bills can use him, more importantly, to attack the Bengals defense.
Yeah, Gabe is kind of known as I would say this offense's vertical threat, right? You go back to that wild card round last week and you go and look at his route tree. For the first time this year, okay, how about this, right? You go back to week 16, and I'm just looking at his next gen stats, right? All of his routes were run from the left side, right? Last week, you saw in breakers, you saw him lining up on both sides. For the first time this year, you really saw Ken Dorsey highlight and really feature Gabriel Davis. And why is that, right? Because Stephon Diggs comes out in that game. He's got 6 for 90 in the first quarter of that game. And it was bracket the rest of the game. And the thing about this Bills offense that I think has scared people a little bit earlier on the season was when Gabriel Davis was kind of going through his growing pains in a role in an offense that was new. I mean, not completely new, but it had new phases to it. I think there was some growing pains on top of the ankle injury. There was some growing pains on his new role with the offense, right? And we talked about Isaiah McKenzie coming out of training camp looking really, really well. It was almost like Isaiah kind of walked into this season as the number 2 a little bit, and Gabriel Davis was struggling to find that everyday role. How can he most and maybe best impact the game in a down in, down out, week in and week out perspective? Last week, I think we started to see more than just Now, he did run a lot of vertical routes, but more than just vertical and stemming off of those verticals, right? So continuing to make look like every single route he runs is that vertical route, and then he's able to stop and come back to the football. We still get that, which is really what makes Gabe, to me, a very integral piece to what they're doing offensively. But I think to me, it's on those in-breaking routes. He is so big, guys. He's the biggest receiver on this team. He's able to box guys out. It's not just the idea of, hey, go give Gabe a 50-50 maul down the sidelines. It's also, can we get Gabe inside leverage against a safety, against a slot corner, which is what we saw last year in the playoffs, right? Like when he's in Kansas City, some of those routes, some of those touchdowns are coming from him running vertical stems from the slot. And I think that gives this team, and playoff Gabe is a real thing, guys. Like it's a real thing now. But looking at this route tree and like looking what he did in that game, you're seeing more over the middle. You're seeing those intermediate routes. And I think that's really where the evolution of this offense in the playoffs has to continue to go. Because I think for me, him out of the slot is a huge, huge mismatch. And with Khalil Shakir instead of Isaiah McKenzie, there's a real threat when you put Shakir on the outside running vertical routes that you can't just ignore him like you would if it was Beasley or maybe if it was Isaiah McKenzie. So for me, this week and the rest of the playoffs, the Bills are winning a Super Bowl this year. I think a lot of it's going to be because of Gabriel Davis. I really do.
No, that's a great point, Greg. I mean, you're in the chat with me every day. I have been preaching Gabe usage in the slot all season long. For a majority of the season, they've only used him 9% in there. And a lot of people are like, okay, what does that matter? Using Gabe in the slot with his size and his blocking ability, using him as a quasi tight end, not just in the passing game, but as a run blocker, he can run all the same routes that Dawson Knox can. And he can block almost just as good, if not better, when you consider the position he plays. But it also opens up some of what Nate said. It opens up those plays down the seam. that play right before halftime where Josh pump faked it with 33 seconds left and threw a dime up over the top, that was from from out the slot. And you can see some of these routes coming over the middle. Since Josh Allen's been in the league and Gabe Davis has played with him, Davis has been his number one threat in the intermediate area on those dig routes like you're seeing there, and those dagger concepts that we're always talking about. So Nate's right, Greg, right? Like moving him around when teams are doubling digs and taking that extra safety out of the way, or if they're even playing those two high coverages, the middle of the field is right for the take. And Gabe Davis exploited that last year in the playoffs.
Well, you think about, what Nate said, if you set up a 3-by-1 and you have Diggs by himself off to the side, you have Knox, in line at the tight end, you bring Gabe in, in just an offset there, and then have Shakir out far right, and you're trying to bracket Diggs. What are you going to do on that other side? How are you going to approach that? That's where they can start to have the counter. That if Lou Anarumo is going to try to take away Davis, and I know last week I think Josh Boyer actually did an underrated job in there, because what he did was he made it look like they were going to bracket Diggs every snap over the second half, but sometimes it was a fake, and so you just didn't know when it was going to be, but they did it often enough to get Josh to kind of pivot away. So if they're going to do that, we know the Bengals have to help their outside corners. We know they're strong up the middle. They have good coverage linebackers. They have good safety play. They don't have strength on the outside. Mike Hilton's good in the nickel. They don't have strength on the outside, so they know they have to help there. So if you force them to show that ahead of time, can that give Josh a little bit more to go that route? And I think that some of those pieces of putting Gabe into the slot will force them to show their hand a little bit more and give Josh just a little bit of information, because Anarumo is so creative in, I haven't seen the numbers, but I know I've seen it discussed by a couple of people, especially on the Bengals side of things. He doesn't have like a go-to specialty. He will show so many different coverages, so many different variations. He's going to have periods of time where he blitzes heavy. He's going to have periods of time where he drops a ton. He's going to have, go through entire stretches of cover 2, cover 3, quarters, mixing in all the different pieces. And it's going to be up to Dorsey and Josh to stay in a rhythm to say, what can we do to show any tell in what they're bringing up? Because if you don't, he's excellent at keeping people off balance.
Yeah, and keeping people off balance, that's what the Bills have to do to this defense, because as Greg said, they're very talented, but they're not one-dimensional. They can do a lot of different things. I mean, they can bring it, bring the extra pass rushers. They can just rush with 4 because they have a talented defensive line, some really underrated linebackers. But I want to talk about winning early downs, because as is the case for most games, first down is quite important. Most people think, it's not the money down. It's not all that important. But no, winning first down is going to be incredibly important for the Bills here. And according to Football Outsiders, first down passing against the Cincinnati defense is not one of their strengths. They're ranked 27th in DVOA on first down passes. And so that got me to thinking, obviously first down is incredibly important, not just for the Bills like to push the ball down the field off of play action on that. And we see that, they'll bring in Bobby Hart and then they'll run play action and push it down the field. And that's a smart tactic. We always talk about it, Greg, right? First down play action. Because especially with the Bengals, they have 60 attempts off of play action on first down, and they surrender 11.6 yards per attempt, which is the worst in the league, a 0.3 EPA, which is the third worst in the league. So first down play action is really where the Bills need to start. And of course, they're going to mix in some runs, Ryan, right? And I know your guy, Devin Singletary, is probably going to get some of those snaps early on, but talk about the balance between running it on first down and getting some yardage to stay ahead of the chains so that you're not in those third downs versus this defense and get those exotic looks and unknown coverages post snap. But how important it is to also take advantage of that play action fake and push the ball down the field on some of those sail concepts, some of those go concepts, those 3-level passing concepts that Josh Allen has liked to run this year.
Well, I've talked about a little bit this year, just how they've kind of throughout the year developed that Bobby Hart package. It felt like through the first few weeks of the season, that was always a run concept. It was always, short yardage. And throughout the year, it's really developed into a really unique package that teams haven't really got a grip on how to defend. This offense, you probably say this about every offense, but the Bills offense in particular, it just feels so much easier when, even if it's just 4 yards on first down, to do so many other things later in the drive, because it feels like once we get into those 2nd and 10s, 3rd and 10s, that's when Josh maybe tends to be a little bit more hectic and he takes a few more of those deep shots. That's what it felt like in that Miami game, that they kept getting into those 3rd and longs because they weren't getting super successful first down plays and they were relying on those deep shots the game. So I think the run game just being a mechanism to keep teams honest and keep the Bills offense moving ahead of the chains efficient so they're not playing from behind the chain so much later in the game, it really helps. This is an offense, the Bills, I think since week 9 are 12th in EPA per running back rush. So they've been really good running back team of late. And it's really, I don't think it's getting talked about enough, because whenever you try to say the Bills are a good running team, people say, oh, it's because Josh Allen's running the ball. No, the running backs have been, and the running game as a whole has been really, really good in this game and throughout down the stretch here. And the only thing I really hope for is we haven't really been able to put away games late. And I really hope if the Bills can get a lead in this game, they can lean on that. And I feel like we haven't been able to milk the clock in some of these games down the stretch. And pick the Miami game, I felt like a couple of these games have been closer than they should have because they haven't been leaning on that.
Yeah, Greg, I'll throw this to you, man, because since you brought up Bobby Hart's name, that's a Bobby Hart revenge game. We're looking at some of the SIS stats here. As we talked about, the Bills do bring in extra offensive linemen a good bunch. They're number 2 in the league with 28 dropbacks with that extra offensive lineman, with 6 offensive linemen on the field. This is just a passing game. Obviously, they run out of it as well, and they may actually need it in that run game as well, maybe even more so than when we're talking about the pass game, because, I think the Bengals have the hogs up front to really cause the athletic, lighter offensive line of the Bills issues and give them fits. So talk about that, that side of it, not just being able to have that extra offensive lineman to run play action, to push the ball down the field for play action on first down, which the Bills better be able to do, but also the run game. It helps in the run game as well.
Yeah. So first, obviously, first down play action gets you to heaven, in case anybody's wondering how to get there.
Yes, it does.
So I love Mitch Morse. DJ Reader is like the worst case scenario.
Worst matchup. Yeah.
I would rather Mitch Morse, like, it sounds crazy, I'd rather have him deal with like one of the crazy, fast penetrating defensive tackles. DJ Reader is just a rock. Like, he just is not going to go anywhere. And that's going to impact what their options are. And it actually, to me, leans into a little, not crazy usage, but a little bit more of that jumbo set Bobby Hart, where we want to give James Cook the option to look and find that cutback lane to be able to go. We've seen some where, hey, can we get a combo block to help on Reader? We've seen some of the counter tray stuff where we're bringing back different guys. I know everybody loved the early touchdown for James Cook, where the misdirection, you had both guard and tackle coming back, and you had kind of a power lead for Josh, and he ends up giving to Cook, and he goes untouched for a touchdown for 20 yards there. We're going to need misdirection. We're going to need outside off tackle, because in between DJ Reader backed up by Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, I would take Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds as a linebacker combo, but I would take them because of pass coverage. Against the run, Wilson and Pratt are studs. They do not miss tackles. They are great at filling where they're at.
They're very nosy. They trust their instincts. Yep.
And they're good in coverage. They're not as good as Milano and Edmonds, but they're good. But they are studs there. So you have to be able to figure out how can we take advantage on the snaps Reader's not on the field? And 2, when he is, how do we work around there to not completely give up the run game? Because I do think there's an opportunity there to be able to get some things going. But if every time we do it, it has to be jumbo set plus Gilliam, and we're tipping our hand, all of a sudden you're giving away some of that benefit. So, passing out of those jumbo sets, and, we're half joking, but, something to Bobby Hart, but especially the leak where you can get guys out there, show all that power, and then get, Knox or Davis coming off the edge, or finding ways to creatively run and not let DJ Reader dictate to us is going to be big.
Yeah, Nate, I'll throw this question to you as well, man. How do the Bills win first down? It's a critical down. The Bills are good. They're one of the best on third down. So getting the third down and Josh Allen, I'm not all too worried about that. Yes, we will see some, different coverages and looks from the defense of the Bengals, but Josh is usually pretty good on the money down, but winning first down. And as we talked about, sometimes that's going to be, hey, play action pass. There's a deep shot. It's not open. Check it down, find your outlet. Sometimes it's going to come to that. And the Bills, again, Josh has done that. I think he's 8th overall. He's top 10 in running back throws. So throws with 5 yards or less. So check downs, swing routes. Josh is top 10 at checking it down to a running back in those type of outlet, curl outlet looks. He's top 10. No one really understands that he does check it down a lot more than he used to. There are just moments where situationally they want him to check it down a little more. So how do the Bills win first down versus the Bengals, a critical down in this game?
Well, I would tell you how I would do it, but I don't believe that that's going to be a shared ideology. I think the sprint out game is how you get away from a guy like DJ Reader in the middle who can really do some things from a power rush and bull rush perspective. And how do you neutralize that? Well, you move Josh Allen out of the pocket. And I think more importantly, moving him out to his left, because everybody makes this big deal about Josh Allen bailing to his right. And you see him and how teams are favoring their spy to the right. So for me, it's get the sprint out game going to Josh's left, get Dawson Knox in those little, arrow route concepts and create, some 1-2 concepts on the left side, Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. But I'm not sure that that's something that's like a shared ideology. They don't run a ton of sprint out in this offense. It's just not something that maybe that's kind of the next phase of things, but it's definitely not something schemed up a whole lot. A lot of the out of pocket stuff comes from Josh Allen just extending plays and going off script a little bit. So because of that, what do I think they will do? Listen, I've been sort of waiting for the Cole Beasley game. And I think the short passing game on first down is going to be really important in this game, because I'm not sure you're going to get a ton of wins on 1st and 10 running the football in obvious running situations. And maybe most importantly, I don't think you're going to see a lot of wins on 2nd down and 10 runs. And that's really where I need almost the offense to have more success on 1st and 10 to save Ken Dorsey from himself. I don't think that Ken Dorsey is running, on 2nd and 10 all the time, but one run on 2nd and 10 to me sometimes is too much, because it puts them in those 3rd and long situations. They don't
better
see
be a draw. If it's 2nd and 10, it better be a draw.
Yes. And to me, mid zone has been a huge success and a huge, I think, phase in with James Cook as the primary running back now. But I'm almost wondering if today or if tomorrow is the day we see more outside zone. Get Logan Wilson on the run, meet him at a point with, James Cook, and let James Cook get those cutback lanes. So I think for me, if they're going to run on first down, I almost wonder if the evolution this week is let's move that zone game out another gap or two. And I wonder if that can be a good counter for what the Bengals do really well. I think you want to stay away from the clutter inside of this Bengals defense. I think you're playing right into the strength of this defense. If you're trying to run pin and pull concepts, if you're trying to run inside zone or mid zone, I think you're running right into the strength of this defense, where I think if you use James Cook's speed, get Nyheim Hines, what I was talking about, some of these jet sweeps that we haven't really seen them do, that's really where I think you can take advantage of a Bengals defense that is stout in the middle, but maybe doesn't have the foot speed or ability to really get to the edges the way that the Bills offense can threaten them. So we'll see if that's kind of a different phase for this offense going into this game.
Yeah, as far as getting Josh on the perimeter, the only consistent play that they run where they get him on that sprint action is they'll have the tight end kind of flexed and they'll roll him out, and Dawson Knox takes that defensive end and they'll run a number 1 wide receiver will be running a curl. They'll have a deep corner or go route, and then they'll have Gabriel Davis. And that's what Josh Allen hit Gabriel Davis a few times on that, rolling to his left and to his right. That's really the only consistent play where they do use that sprint action. They don't use a lot of that wide zone play action bootleg type stuff, especially from under center. It's not something they do a lot of, like you said.
It's also not great for them because of how defensive ends want to try to rush after Josh Allen. They want to get depth. They want to get depth and push Josh in. And that makes it hard to do those wide zone kind of curls to the other way, because you've got a defender kind of waiting for Josh on that backside.
Yeah. And then again, the teams, especially defensive ends, edge players, they want to contain Josh Allen. So they, more times than not, they're just going to stay home. They'll be down an extra defender in pursuit just to hold Josh back and contain him. But if they do run one of those off a wide zone from under center and they get that leak and they get that guy going around the backside, not going to the side they're rolling to. If they sneak him out the backside, that's when you'll have a play on those type of play action type plays. So before we wrap up the offensive side, I want to talk offensive line for the Bills versus the Bengals D. I do think they're going to have some issues, and as has been the case for most years, Spencer Brown has been the low man on the totem pole, kind of the weak link across the offensive line when we're talking consistency, Ryan. So before I get you out of here, I want you to talk about Spencer Brown and who he's up against, because Hubbard, their left defensive end, is there all the time. I mean, he's at the left defensive end spot 99% of the time. Hendrickson is right side almost all the time. All of their stats and all their alignment usually comes from those matchups. So he's going to be up. Spencer Brown's going to be up against Hubbard a majority of the day. And it's important for him to cover down throughout the entire play, because for me, Hubbard is a glue guy. He's not going to win with his first move. He's going to win with his hustle and motor. And I think that's when Josh can get in trouble, when he holds onto the ball and create those turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope they find a way to get him some help in this game, because we've seen him, multiple games this year just get beat, and the offensive line is going to have their hands full, with a lot of play. With you talked about it with DJ Reader and Mitch Morris, they're going to have to find help for him. They're going to have, Trey Hendrickson's not an easy guy. He's a super unique player with his length and what he does and his motor. He's kind of like Rousseau in the fact that he always seems to find sacks, because he just stays in the play so long. So, you talked about it a ton with, those extra offensive linemen, having Reggie Gilliam in there to chip, or having, and I really think in this game, I think Lou Amarulo, God, I'm so bad at pronouncing names. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's watching the tape too from last week, and he saw the play, the strip fumble where Josh got fooled a little bit, didn't look the right way. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of communication with their pass sets, because I got to imagine that he saw that he's going to try to trick Josh the same way that Josh Boyer tricked Josh on a couple of those pressures or simulated pressures, whatever it is they do. So I think communication pre-snap stuff is going to be massive in this game, because if he was watching tape, then I imagine he's going to try some similar things.
So real quick, to put some respect on the man's name, because I've done the same thing. Shockingly, there's no L in his last name. It doesn't make any sense. There should be an L. It's like the word room. Like you walk into a room, it's Anna Room O.
I want to say Amarillo all the time.
I was close.
How is there not an L in his last name? It doesn't make any sense. It's Anna Rumo. I've had to look it up like 3 times because I keep
I just call him Lou. I call him
Big Lou.
Big Lou. I do
I'm
like
good
Big
with
Lou.
Big Lou. We'll just roll.
Is that from Major League? Is that a Major League reference? Big Lou.
It might be Big Lou.
Nate, I'll get your thoughts on that too, man. Bill's offensive line versus that Bengals defensive line. We kind of touched upon the interior, guys that they have up the middle, but the guys on the edge are pretty good too, and they play with consistency, and they're very, very persistent and can create havoc along the edges for the Bills offensive line.
Let me turn around and ask you guys a question.
Oh,
do you remember a game this year where the Bills had an advantage on the offensive line against a defensive line?
The Bears. The Bears. The Bears.
Okay, the Bears. The Bears. What it's, guys, like what this is like, and let me if I'm good for one thing, I'm gonna bring a golf reference into this.
Oh, there we go.
It's like being a scratch golfer, but you don't have any game with the driver. So you leave the driver in the bag sometimes, and you just say, well, you know what? I'm going to hit the 4-iron. I'm going to hit the 3-wood. I'm going to sacrifice some distance, but I'm going to put it in the middle of the fairway and give myself opportunities to hit greens in regulation, hit some putts, and get out of here with, with a good score. And I feel like that is sometimes almost how Ken Dorsey has to call plays, right? And one of the, I think, frustrating things for me last week, was the insistence on those deep plays. And obviously Josh Allen sacked 7 times because a lot of those deep balls and those longer developing pass patterns and pass concepts basically put the Bills offensive line front and center and say, we need you to give Josh Allen 3.5, 4 seconds. And sometimes that can be a task. And listen, Miami's defensive line, when you add in the pressure packages that they put and the simulated pressure packages that they put, can really put offensive lines in a bind. We are not going to see anywhere near the exotic blitz packages, the line of scrimmage pre-snap where you're asking, listen, that fumble, in the defensive touchdown, that was almost surprised we didn't see more of that, where Josh Allen a lot of times is guessing at the line of scrimmage, who's coming, who's not. I got to get this protected. Even if Cincinnati decides to blitz the Bills with more frequency than maybe we're used to seeing Cincinnati blitz, I don't think we're going to see 7 guys at the line of scrimmage, because the last thing that they want to do is put Stephon Diggs, put Gabriel Davis in one-on-one situations like the Miami Dolphins did. And the difference, I think, too, is, listen, I think Trey Hendrickson's a really good player. I think Sam Hubbard's a really good player. I talk a lot of trash about Bradley Chubb because I think he's overpaid, and I think they spent a lot of money on him. But he had a really good game. Jalen Phillips is
a star. He's a star.
I mean, he is ascending. They don't, as much as I like Trey Hendrickson, he's not Jalen Phillips. He's not. So I think that when you have DJ Reader and Wilkins are probably pretty close. Wilkins a little bit more spry than maybe DJ Reader is, where he's a little bit more power. But guys, let's just call it what it is. The Bills have had a disadvantage on the offensive line in every game, but a handful of them this year. It's not anything that Ken Dorsey isn't used to game planning around. But I do think this is the type of game where you're going to have to get creative, maybe more so than you've ever had to. And, I know a lot of people look at Saffold and Spencer Brown, and I don't know. I think if you're an offensive coordinator and you look at what you have, there are things you can do with Spencer Brown, even though he struggles in some of those power sets and some of the speed rushers around him.
Yeah.
But man, he can also be deployed as a weapon, where I think sometimes, especially in the run game, sometimes with Roger Saffold, you're just kind of holding your breath sometimes. And he's graded out as one of the worst starting offensive linemen and interior offensive linemen in the league, but he's still a veteran. He doesn't make young or rookie mistakes. He just makes mistakes because he doesn't really have the juice he used to have in the interior of the offensive line. But I just think going into this game, you're going into Sunday in a professional tournament in golf. You already know what you have in the bag. You're not surprised all of a sudden you pull the driver out and you can't hit it straight. You can't get it in the fairway. They know what they're working with, and because of that, that's why you're going to see more Bobby Hart in this game. But all in all, this is not a surprise. They aren't thrown off by their offensive line's ability or lack of ability to win a lot of one-on-one battles during a game. So because of that, it's not as big of a disadvantage as maybe it looks like on paper, because this team is hyper aware of their weaknesses up front.
Right.
And weirdly,
and so, go ahead.
For the name that Hubbard has, I almost think he's like the least bad matchup for Spencer Brown. Like, I'm more afraid of the guys who can dip the shoulder and just beat him around the corner. Like, I kind of think he's going to get him. Hubbard's going to get him more than once. But I actually think his style is one that I kind of think Brown can work with for the majority of snaps.
Right, and I think you're right, because you're talking Jalen Phillips. He's a speed guy with length. He's got the whole package, really.
Yeah.
Hubbard, as I said, he's a veteran. He knows how to set up moves, change his moves, and set up offensive linemen and read their sets. But he's more anytime I watch him, it's more of the hustle plays where he makes his impact. And I do think he will.
Amount of snaps, like a power defensive end that has games with like multiple 90% snap games. Like, nobody does that. It's crazy.
And so real quick to wrap this up, I had mentioned this on social media during the week of that wild card weekend and how the right tackle, Spencer Brown, had issues. And so I brought up this allowed pressure stat from PFF. It's pressures. They say pressures are a stat a QB can own. This report considers plays where the offense allowed pressure. So offensive players may share responsibility for an allowed pressure. For example, a defender splits a double team and yada, yada, yada. So as you can see, 27.8% of that responsibility of the pressures that Josh Allen faced in that wild card game was 27.8 was on Spencer Brown at right tackle. And if you look at Joe Burrow, he's up there a little higher at 33.3% against the Ravens, which we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that here in a second. But I know Mexico Marty was in the chat room asking about what this stat means. And again, it just shows kind of the responsibility that the offensive line takes on when we're talking pressures and who surrenders it. So with that segment over offense, we're going to have to go to the defense and try to move through it a little quicker, but that was fun. Ryan, let everyone know where they can find you on social media. We get you out of here and on your way. We appreciate the content you put out today on the website and joining us in the roundtable.
Of course, find me at SportsRock2 on Twitter. I have an article a week coming out on the website. I appreciate you guys for reading, and I appreciate you guys for having me on. Always fun to be on with such a smart group of guys here.
All right, man. You take care, brother. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the game.
You too.
All right, guys, let's get to the defensive side here. In a few minutes, we're going to bring in our new intern, AJ, to help. He's been in the background helping us out. We're going to bring him in a few minutes, but I want to get some to the defensive side of the ball because we had one of our new employees, Andrew Stasel, put together some really interesting analytics, and I want to bring them up on the screen here. Let's start with the coverages of the let's see here. Hold on. Let me see. That's okay. So here, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati passing game against the Ravens. Obviously, Jonah Williams, left tackle, went down for the Bengals in that game. So the game plan had to change, right? And so a lot of the talk this week is, can the Bills get enough pressure against the Bengals offense when Joe Burrow gets rid of the ball so quickly? And so if we look at the first to second half, there were obviously some adjustments made. You can see the blitz rate from the Ravens on the bottom near the chart. The blitz rate went from 16.7 in the first half to 5.6 in the second half. The average time to throw changed from 2.91 seconds, where they're trying to hold the ball and push it down the field a little longer, to 2.78 seconds.
Which were both high for Burrow.
Really high. Absolutely. Yeah. And, again, divisional games, guys, we always talk about it. Everyone knows each other really well. The Bills and Dolphins aren't the only teams that had to deal with this. And so, those things kind of creep up a little bit. And so you can see some of those stats courtesy of Andrew and PFF. And so, Greg, I want to start with you, man. Let's start with the defensive line. What does the defensive line have to do? Well, I guess you could say secondary too, to not only get Burrow to hold on to the ball, but to create that pressure? Because believe it or not, when the Bills do get pressure, which I think they're 24th in pressure rate, when they do get pressure, they're the fastest team to get pressure on a quarterback at 2.17 seconds. So there's a formula there for the Bills, but for a defensive line that has struggled this year, who can get home? Who can win their matchup along that offensive line of the Bengals?
So it makes me wonder about, that stat you reference about when the Bills create pressure, they get home the fastest of any. So that will tell you that either it's schemed open or a direct immediate win. We've seen some of those from Ed Oliver where hey, he just roasted his dude and was there quicker than what the quarterback could do anything about. Hopefully we get some of those. Hopefully we get a few of those where, since we don't blitz that often, Frazier has had some pretty good timing that, when he does call it up, when they're you posture in the A gap, you posture in the A gap, you posture in the A gap. Hey, I'm coming this time. You get them sometimes where they're just not ready for it, and you've lulled them into that false sense of security. So, but that's going to be a small handful. We're obviously not going to trick them over and over and over again. So now it's going to come up into a defensive staff and philosophy that is not big on gambling is going to be asked, okay, how often, how much can we press up? Because I think that map on the right is more of what we will expect. It's, do we get the defensive line's hands up? Can we get some passes knocked down? Can we press up, get a little bit tighter coverage? Because if you sit there and just give them space underneath, the combination of physical receivers like Higgins and Chase with the accuracy of Burrow and how quick he can get it out, they'll just move the ball down the field. So now it's going to be, how comfortable are we gambling that, hey, even if they do dial up a double move, we think we can get home, and that Cincinnati knows we could get home if you try a deeper drop and a double move. So they're not going to try it. And that cat and mouse game of how much can we press up and keep the coverage tight without getting burned is going to be a constant, just, test match back and forth between the two between the Bengals offense and the Bills defense, because I think this map on the right is what we're going to see, is a ton of quick stuff, a ton of stuff underneath, getting into the hands of those talented receivers quickly. And normally that's what the Bills kind of invite and welcome. So it's going to really test their scheme to say, hey, are we willing to push up a little bit more to try to avoid it?
Right, and I love the point that Charles makes in the chat room. He says Burrow gets the ball out quickly, but he's got the second most tip passes, so get your hands up, which it's a great talking point, Nate, right? Because when we talk about the Bills pass rushers over the years, they haven't been those bendy types. They've been the long, powerful guys. Joe Burrow has 20 batted passes at the line, not at the line of scrimmage, but batted passes. That's second in the league behind Justin Herbert. guys like Gregory Rousseau, guys like Basham, those guys in the interior are guys are going to have to get their hands up. Even the linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds, when he's up near the line of scrimmage, get your hands up because they can bat the pass down when Joe Burrow wants to get the ball out quickly. But Nate, I'll throw this to you. Who on the defensive line needs to stand out for the Bills to win that pressure game, win their one-on-ones along the Bengals offensive line? I know the offensive line of the Bengals is beat up, but who needs to have a game for the Bills defense to limit this explosive offense?
Payne, Jordan Phillips, and I'm not sure that that he's going to be the player. I mean, right now you can tell the shoulder injury is affecting him.
He literally might not be able to get his hands.
Yeah, right, and that's tough because I think he's kind of the one mismatch, especially on third down when you have him and Ed Oliver together, that I think really can create some chaos in the middle of the field. So with that said, I might look to this Bills defense and Leslie Frazier bumping Gregory Rousseau down into the 3-tech more on third down. And because this is the matchup and this is the quarterback where I think pressure up the middle is going to be at a premium, because I just don't think edge players, I don't think are going to get to Joe Burrow in time to really affect him in any, potentially positive way. Correct. Not consistently. So in this game, I think Ed Oliver needs to have like one of those games where he's just constantly beating his one-on-one matchups across the face, force them to double team you so that you can open things up for DaQuan Jones. You can open up some things on the other side because DaQuan Jones is a sneaky good. If you can get DaQuan Jones in one-on-ones, that could be a real mismatch for you.
He can collapse. Right. He can collapse the pocket.
That's exactly right.
Which is important, right? Getting a guy like Burrow off his spot.
Off the spot in the same way you think about Tom Brady, right? If you can get Joe Burrow to throw a couple of throws in this game off of his back foot within the pocket, that's how you get 4 interceptions against him against Pittsburgh, right? Like you have these things of pressing the pocket forward and forcing him to sort of, lean back or fall away on some of those throws. He does not have the same level of arm strength that Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes does to overcome that imbalance in his posture. So that to me is
hoping for some wind this game just to be able to emphasize that. But sadly, it looks like it's going to be pretty calm.
Same, yeah. And so I think this game, it really comes from the interior. I don't know how creative, though, that I'll expect Leslie Frazier to get. Will we see Gregory Rousseau bump down? I mean, maybe a couple of plays, a handful of plays, but it's just not something they've really done this year.
Third downs for sure. It'll be a third down play.
Agreed. And I just think with his length, getting him in the passing lanes, and in the same way too, I think in this game you could see some 2-man coverages because I think you want to play those 2 high safeties deep, everything over the top. Don't let Jamar Chase, don't let T. Higgins beat you on deep routes. Make sure you have that coverage in the backside, but maybe some trail technique, maybe some jams at the line of scrimmage so that you are forcing. If Joe Burrow is going to make a short throw, it's got to be in a tight window. And you got to have those linebackers kind of coming in and helping as well and scraping over. So, yeah, I think this game gets really interesting in that I think the pressure has to come from the middle of the field.
The middle. Yeah, I totally agree. If you guys, after the show, get onto the @Cover1 Twitter handle, I posted a bunch of clips from the game against the Ravens where the Ravens did exactly that with their edge rusher Owe, and they bumped him inside on a lot of third downs and really had him rushing and using that length and speed and athleticism on those guards against the Bengals, and it created havoc.
And they combined that with a few of their snaps of when they brought 3 and dropped 8.
Oh, they
figured out that, hey, kicking in our long, athletic, powerful defensive end can be the kind of supplement we need that, hey, you only have to bring 3. They mixed that in with a couple. And I'm looking it up right now. I think we've seen, Nate, you were pretty spot on. At most, we've seen 17 snaps of Rousseau rushing from inside. So not 0, but 17 out of 552.
Like they used him Titans game, Green Bay game, I believe was a couple reps in there.
Yeah, so, not a ton, but we've seen it sprinkled. What do you
guys
that
think about
the thing coming out of Miami though? Like they use him as a nose tackle at times on pass breakdowns. So it's in the arsenal. The Bills don't use it all that often, and Leslie Frazier is more conservative. But it is a wrinkle. If we're talking wrinkles, that is one of those wrinkles on defense.
Yeah, Dan mentions too in the comments, with 3 starters out for Cincinnati, that he thinks they need a blitz to generate that pressure. And in this game, I'd rather see them rush 3 than try to rush 5. The last thing you want to do is put guys in adverse situations in coverage. You don't want to put, even though you love what you see from Kyer Elam last week, I'm not really interested in putting Kyer Elam on an island and forcing him to cover a guy like T. Higgins or cover even a Tyler Boyd one-on-one. So, yeah, I would almost rather see the inverse of that. I would rather see more 3-man rushes than I would rather see them try to get after. Skylar Thompson's a different story.
Yeah. Eric's talked about it a ton with the importance of the simulated pressures, the creepers, the mugged up looks
of that line,
where set that up and have them not know, is it 3, 4, or 5 coming, and which ones. So, do I want they're not gonna do it with Daquan or with Oliver, but do I want Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson out in coverage? No, but sprinkled in a couple times to just drop into a little hot route hook read area while on that play you brought Milano and Edmonds, like just catching them off guard to where it looks like a blitz, but you actually only bring 3, but they don't know which 3 are coming. You can use that and sprinkle that in where it can touch on, what Dan's talking about there, that blitzing is an overused term by people that you don't have to blitz, meaning we sent more than 4, blitz meaning 5+. You can catch them off guard without it needing to be extra rushers.
All right, AJ, I'm going to get your thoughts on this, man. Welcome to the show and joining us. Welcome to the network, man. We appreciate all the work you've done already behind the scenes, but I want to get your thoughts on that delicate balance between, dropping 3 guys into coverage, rushing 5 or 6 guys, which when we're talking blitzing, the Bengals actually do struggle. Joe Burrow does struggle versus 5-man pressures, but it's that delicate balance. You can't lean one way or the other. Joe Burrow is just too good.
Yeah, I just want to talk about, and like it's going right along with what you're saying, but the mental aspect of this game for Joe Burrow going into this game down 3 starters. I think you see it with Josh Allen sometimes with his lack of confidence in his O-line. Even if you don't, necessarily blitz or you show some pressure and, don't actually send all the guys you're showing to send pressure. There's a thing that comes this week where I put out a tweet, and with 7 men in the box pre-snap, according to SIS, Burrow has thrown 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And that's when he has no pressure. So like when he's planted in the pocket, not moving around, when there's 7 in the box pre-snap, whether, if they send 5, show 7, send 4, whatever it is, he's 5 to 5. So 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, and then completing only 65%, which is good for, most quarterbacks. But like I said, Burrow's 69% on the year. So completing less. So if you can even, show and stack the box with 7, and you're not necessarily going to send all those guys and you're just going to drop 4, sending 7 and giving, like Joe Burrow's in the pocket, he knows there's 3 O-linemen that, he's had his whole O-line the most, almost the whole year.
Yeah.
So if you're showing 7 and he's in the huddle and he sees, oh my God, there's 7 guys in the box, the stats reflect, and now with 3 guys in the O-line hurt, maybe that could cause some turnovers. It's going to be huge for Milano and Edmonds to, get their hands up. They're, one of the best linebacker duos in the league, getting those hands up, causing turnovers. And then one more thing, talking about, like, according to PFF here, I looked while I was in the back, and down throw, deep 20+ yard passes, T. Higgins is their best down, 20+ yard receiver with 9 catches on the year and 18 targets. Jamar Chase only has 4 catches, beyond 20+ air yards all season on 16 targets. So they're not really, spreading the ball that deep. I mean, they do have that deep playability, but like you guys have said the whole show, they're getting it out so quick. But like you saw in that second half of that Ravens game, that doesn't mean it's always going to work. They went 3 and out. They were, I think mentally, just as challenging it will be physically for this O-line, the mental aspect of Joe Burrow behind that O-line, if you can show pressure and not necessarily even send it, that'll be key in this game.
Yeah, totally. And, 3-man rushes, I saw a comment on there that'll give Joe Burrow all day. Joe Burrow is the 3rd worst quarterback versus 3-man rushes if we're talking EPA. So, yes, it may give him time, but if all those passing lanes are congested, he can't throw it. He's thrown 3 interceptions to 2 touchdowns against 3-man rushes, and he has, let's see how many dropbacks he has. He has 45 dropbacks versus 3-man rushes. That's the 9th most, but the 3rd worst EPA versus it. It is, again, it's just one factor of a game plan. It's not the main thing. You're not going to see 10 3-man rushes. You're going to see 3, 4. The Ravens use 6. But I want to talk about that coverage in the back end and the secondary. And it starts with guys like Trey White, Taron Johnson, Jordan Poyer. I mean, the entire secondary, Dane Jackson, it seems like they're going to have most of their corners available and most of their secondary available, aside from Micah Hyde. Greg, I'll throw this to you, man. What's going to happen on the back end? Because if we look at some of these stats from that, again, the Ravens game, it's a little different because of divisional rival, the quarterback and all that. But if you look at how they changed their coverage from first to second half, Burrow saw a lot more cover 2 and less cover 6 in the second half of that game. So they went to more of those 2 high shells and a little more cover 3, which the Bills have played a ton of cover 3 since Trey's been back. So when we're talking coverages, I mean, this is really where it's going to start. And honestly, it kind of plays to the Bills' strengths in many ways, because that's what they like to do. 2 high shells and then, force you to work through down the field. Are they going to force Burrow to have to consistently work the ball down the field, cap off those big plays, as AJ was talking about, to Higgins and even Chase at times or whoever, and keep everything in front of them? I mean, can he consistently do that with that offensive line against these coverages?
I absolutely think it's what we're going to see. I think that both Cincinnati knows that's in their best interest. Burrow is accurate. He has a quick trigger. He's able to get the ball out early. They have athletes everywhere. We've talked a lot about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Rightfully, they're fantastic, but they also have Tyler Boyd. They also have Hayden Hurst. They also have both Mixon and Pirine out of the backfield. They have athletes across the board that it's in their best interest to get the ball into their hands and then see what they can do. I think the Bills, that leads into what their normal defense is that, hey, keep everything in front of you, rally and tackle, able to make plays. And I think we're going to see a battle where that's going to be the predominant element here. So just like we saw last week from Baltimore, where early on it was 40% cover 2 and cover 3. The second half, it was almost 60% cover 2 and cover 3. I don't know if we'll see a shift like that. I think it's going to be more that, hey, we know with their offensive line, that means we can get home with 3 or 4, and it also means they're going to get the ball out early. I think we're going to see more of this second half mix, in that we don't necessarily lean in as much as what we've seen there. We don't show a ton of cover 0. We don't show some of those different pieces. I'm expecting it to be a lot of little wrinkles, little differences, but otherwise strength versus strength. It's going to be this quick passing game against the Bills' shell rally and tackle defense that they're going to try to continue to use. I do think maybe the strength that Kaiir Elam has shown the last game and a half here, in that maybe it gives them a little bit more, one more little tool in the tool belt to play around a bit. Maybe we see that a touch more. And I honestly hope that we see a healthy amount of snaps from Elam because of his athletic ability to match up with what Chase and Higgins has. I don't expect him to get 100% and to take the job and to completely bench Dane Jackson. But I brought this up Wednesday night. It's not completely unprecedented. We know they got frustrated to the point with Dane where they gave an entire game to Xavier Rhodes. They went away from him for an entire game. And that I think there's a chance that we see a healthy amount of Elam, or maybe even an entire game of Elam. I'm expecting it to be the rotation, and they kind of try to find the hot hand as it goes. But I'm hoping that we see a really healthy amount of Kaiir Elam.
Right, Nate. And, when we're talking coverages, and if they're going to sit in those 2 high shells, whether it's cover 2 or quarters or whatever, those 2 high shells, and the ball's coming out quickly, tackling is going to be so important. Huge. Tackling Jamar Chase, tackling Mixon on those checkdowns and those crossers. Tackling is going to be incredibly huge. But if we're talking that cornerback position that Greg just started with, who do you expect to get a majority of those reps, and why? Because when we're talking quick game, you got to understand that, again, tackling is going to be a deal. And if one way to stop the quick game is to get up in their face and press. And we all know that Elam, that is his specialty.
That's why I think, 2 high, man under makes a lot of sense in this game. I think cover 3 is going to make some sense in this game to bring. And the reason I say cover 3 too is because understanding Dean Marlowe maybe isn't in his best situation as a 2 high safety. And you're talking about, wanting to tackle. I think you want to bring him in the box and keep Jordan Poyer. But I think what this game's going to come down to is how much can you disguise coverages pre to post snap? Can you start in 2 high looks and then shift into cover 3 looks? And I would tend to agree wholeheartedly with Greg about, Kaiir Elam, I think, getting the opportunity in this game. And what does that mean then for Leslie Frazier? They're going to do things and they're going to put him in situations where maybe you see cover 3 on one side, or maybe you see zone coverage on one side and man to the other, and really lean in to the press man coverage ability of Kaiir Elam. And maybe that's how you also protect Trey a little bit, because I don't know that you want to necessarily put Trey in a ton of trail technique opportunities against a guy like Jamar Chase. We saw them take advantage of that on the first play of the game and get the defensive pass interference. And it's not to say that I'm telling Trey White's slow now, but he is still coming back from us. He's still working. He's not, he had some.
Trey White at 100% capacity is not a foot race candidate with Jamar Chase.
No, and you did see some vintage Trey White plays last week, right? Like he gets beat in a foot race with Jalen Waddle and plays the ball better than just about anybody in the NFL. Oh, you want to? He is really good at watching the hands of receivers, watching eyes of receivers. Those hands go up. Trey White understands in that moment that's where he's going to best impact play, is when those hands go up. So I think for me in this game with the receivers, AJ's got a great point about T. Higgins being their real vertical threat. That's why I see Kaiir Elam maybe trying to match up more against T. Higgins. And what you're going to have to do in this little cat and mouse game is, we know the Bills don't like to necessarily move and rotate their corners. They like to sit them on one side of the field and leave them there. And I wonder if the Bengals will try to take advantage of that. Do they want to get one-on-one situations with Chase and Elam on one side and put T. Higgins on Tre'Davious White? We'll see what that cat and mouse game looks like. But I think there's going to be a lot more pre to post snap, starting in 2 high, rotating down to 1 high, and seeing a lot of, like quarter, half, or seeing a lot of like, hey, we're going to play zone coverage on one side and man on the other, because I think they have to mix up those looks. And I think playing just standard cover 3 looks and staying in like very basic and bland post snap looks is going to really play into what Joe Burrow does very well. He can diagnose things. He understands if you're going to run this coverage, they've got the play to beat it, and he knows where he's going to go to the football before the snap is even, getting to his hands. So I think that's going to be the key in this game is diagnosing and disguising a little bit more than maybe they're used to, and maybe what we're used to seeing what Micah Hyde is in the lineup.
Right. And I'm honestly happy that the Bills won last week, but I think it was also a very good test for this secondary, including Marlowe and Elam, guys that, they made 7 plays on the ball last week.
Yeah.
That was one of the main issues all year. They were in decent position most of the year. They're in the hip pockets of these wide receivers most of the year. But then when the ball was thrown to that receiver, they couldn't make plays on the ball. Last week they did. And so especially Elam, and his interception, coincidentally enough, it was actually in zone. He was sinking as in a cover 2 corner. So I do think that was a good test, but it was a different test, right? It was speed. It was speed-based, really good play design. And this week it's going to be mano and mano. It's going to be like, it's not going to be speed. It's going to be contested catches. It's going to be physicality at the top of routes. So the defensive secondary has to be ready for that. And so having guys like Elam that have the athleticism, the speed, and all those, check boxes when it comes to traits, having his ability to play now and make those plays on the ball to match up against a T. Higgins, a contested catch monster, and then have Trey White reading some of those route combinations, and more importantly, having to wrap him up, because Chase is going to get his, especially on hitches and those, shallow underbreaking routes, but they got to go tackle him. So AJ, real quick, I'm going to get your thoughts on that cornerback position and how the Bills are going to defend those wide receivers.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a thing where on tape, Elam, he has his moments. Obviously, he's made like the splash plays. Last week, you look at what the interception you guys are talking about. But Sean McDermott, since he's gotten here, the way he's used Levi Wallace, and he might not be the most talented or athletically gifted guy, but he understands the system and understands where to be in the zone. I think it's a point where how confident are you sending, and I know he had the experience last week, but how confident are you putting Elam with all those other athletic traits out there? There's sometimes on that film where he looks absolutely lost. So it's tough for me because, yes, obviously you're going against a really good receiving core. You need that speedy, athletic, guy on the outside that can make, big plays. But what if he's in the wrong spot and you have a guy in Dane Jackson who, he might not be the most, athletic, flashiest guy out there, but he knows where to be. He's been in the system longer and he's been out there. He's had more reps all year. It's hard for me. I think it'll be a split, honestly.
He has their trust. He absolutely has their trust.
And that's where, the fans can, hate on Dane. And I understand to a point where, yes, he's not going to, be the top stud corner or top cornerback 2 you want him to be, but he knows the defense, he knows the system. So it's tough for me. I think it'll be a split.
Yeah, I do think they swap those guys out, and not just because of who they are and what they bring to the table, but also they want to keep that offense off balance in many ways. And so they can't just attack the guy that's maybe having a rough game or a rough couple drives. I think they do swap those guys out as well. So let's wrap this up. Greg, I'm going to get your final thoughts on this game, on this matchup, man, I can't wait. 3:00 Sunday cannot come soon enough.
Yeah, I think one thing, we are now in that area where I think a lot of people have asked, what happens if we don't win? Does that make everything a failure? And I think it's fine. I think we're at a point where expectations are high, and it's okay to say that our goal was not to make it to the division round. But this is what our life's going to be like now. Like, this is just how things are going to work.
Right.
The roster we have, Josh Allen, the coaching that we have, the GM that we have, winning the division, winning double-digit games, winning a playoff game, getting to this final 8. This is our life now. Once you get here, now it really is a crapshoot. Cincinnati's really good. Joe Burrow's really good. They absolutely have a shot to win this game. Do some people want to argue it's 55-45, and some people think it's 60-40, and some people think it's 50-50? Sure. But there's no slam dunk here. They're two really good teams. Both teams absolutely have a shot to win this game. And guess what? If we win, it's going to be the same thing next week. And if we win that, it's going to be the same thing in the Super Bowl. It's only good teams left. There's no easy games anymore. So enjoy this. This is what our life is like now. We get to get into these kind of situations. Hopefully, I think that the Bills are slightly better. I think that the Bills are slightly healthier, and they're at home. I'm hoping that's enough for them to pull out a win here. I think that we're going to see the timing of all of the criticism of Ken Dorsey, all of the criticism of Josh Allen, all of the criticism of we have the worst weapons of every playoff team left is awesome timing. It's awesome timing. I like this team a lot more as the chip on their shoulder underdog than as everybody picking them as a favorite. And I think that it was a gift that everybody gave that locker room. This every show you go on, there's graphics of literally every single person picking the Bengals. That is perfect timing. And I think that doesn't mean we're going to boat race them. It doesn't mean we're going to just, completely mollywop them. I think it's going to be just enough that we get by this game.
Nate, let's hear your final thoughts on this matchup, brother.
I think my final thoughts on this matchup and any remaining matchup, if they're able to win in advance, survive in advance, is, the Bills can beat they could beat 31 teams in football. The 32nd team is themselves. And I think that they really, when they struggle, when they are vulnerable, is when they have to beat the team that lines up across from them, and they have to beat themselves. And I think, this is the type of game where you got to start to clean things up, start to get into your stride and play your best football. They did it last year, and then they beat themselves in the divisional round against Kansas City. And that's got to be the lesson that this team learns. And Josh Allen in this game, I'd like to see a more concerted effort to say, you know what? I'm going to dirt this. I'm going to throw this in the dirt. We're going to get to the next play. We're going to see another down. And understand that you don't want to put a governor on Josh Allen, but you also, if you're Josh Allen, have to understand in some situations a throwaway, an incompletion is just as good as a completion, as a first down. And I think in this game, whoever can stop themselves from beating themselves will probably win this football game. It may not come down to whose quarterback's better. I think both quarterbacks are going to play at a very high level. It may not be which group of wide receivers plays the best and makes the most plays. I think this game might come down to who can do the least against themselves. And I think if Josh Allen, the Bills, can cut down on the turnovers, if this is a 1 turnover game or no turnovers, I don't see how teams can beat the Bills. I just don't. It just comes down to, can they not beat themselves? And if that's the case this week, they're an incredibly dangerous team this weekend moving forward. So for me, don't beat yourself. And I think the Bills are going to have a great opportunity to survive in advance.
Love it.
AJ, let's hear your final thoughts, brother.
Yeah, first off, I'm excited to be there, tomorrow for the game. And it's the first home game since 94. So I've been a season ticket holder for 2 years now. So I got them at the perfect time.
That's awesome.
It's awesome to go to, watch this team. But just my final thought is, you're in a divisional game, just like last year, down a guy in the secondary that was a star. Last year without Trey White, this year without Micah Hyde. This time it's at home, though. You still don't have that star pass rusher because Vaughn went down. So you're kind of in a spot where look, this defensive line, whether it's Rousseau, who's, had a really good year, but he's not, a proven guy yet, but he's up and coming for sure, and he has very high potential. And then you got guys like Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa. I said this since the beginning of the week is there's not a bigger moment and better moment for those guys to step up. And that doesn't always have to be, getting pressures or, getting home because Burrow gets it out so fast, but even, getting hands on the ball or tipping the ball, making plays. It's going to come down to that. One of those, 3-4 young guys on the D line or Ed Oliver, who is looking for a new contract, look, what a perfect time, for him to have a really good, next couple of weeks and get that, earn that next contract. So it's going to come down to that. And then, obviously, it's just going to be an awesome game with two elite quarterbacks. I think turnovers are, like Nate said, whoever, is better at not turning the ball over and doing that throughout the game, that'll be key.
Yeah, I do think that's the key, guys, right? It usually is, as Nate said, as Josh Allen, if he protects the ball and plays within himself, they're hard to beat. And he's hard to beat because he's just so dynamic. And I do think it does come to the offense. I do think that the pressure is on the offense. I think the defense is experienced. Yeah, there are some holes here and there. AJ mentioned Micah Hyde, but I do think the staff overall, they're comfortable with the scheme they play. They're comfortable with the players they have. They've been in the system for a very long time. I think they will lean on that experience. The only people on the staff that really don't have this experience in games like this are Ken Dorsey, are Joe Brady. Aaron Kromer has some, obviously with a different team, but they're all working together to make those in-game adjustments against a very good Bengals defense personnel-wise, but from a staff as well, especially their defensive coordinator. So they were in the big game last year, so they understand the pressure and moment ahead of them tomorrow. And I'm just not sure if Ken Dorsey is or if Joe Brady is. And I know Kromer, again, I think he has some really good experience in that. So maybe they lean on him more when it comes to those in-game adjustments. But I do think that it is going to come down to the Bills offense. Josh Allen not only protecting the ball, but not having the aggressive mindset early, because more times than not, this staff has always said, we're going to come out in that 15 to 20 play script, and we're going to be aggressive. We're going to put points on the board so that our defense can pin their ears back, rush the passer, like that old, like Peyton Manning Colts type formula, right? I don't think you can do that in this game. Don't come out swinging. By all means, run your script. Move the ball, get points on the board, but you do not need to be aggressive. If nothing's there, go ahead and check it down. Find your outlet, run that draw, check to a draw. Do things like that to keep the game in front of you, keep it on track. And then once those adjustments start filtering in, hey, they're running this coverage against this look, then you start making those adjustments and start swinging for plays down the field. So I think the pressure's on the offense for the lack of experience versus that Bengals defense, personnel and staff-wise. So, guys, this was a fun time. We're going to have to do this more. Hopefully, we can do this
next week.
Next week, right? As soon as next week. So real quick, Greg, give me your handle. Let everyone know what you got going on this week, and then we'll just go around the table and wrap it up.
Absolutely. So you can find me at Greg Thompson. And one request, there are 308 people in here watching right now, which is awesome for a Saturday morning. Please go hit the like button. It tells other people about the show. That's how the algorithm works. Take a minute here before you leave, before you go anywhere. That's all we ask. Go and press the like button. It really makes a big difference. Help us out there. We appreciate it. The chat's been awesome today. I didn't expect this many people to jump in here with us on a Saturday morning. This was really cool. Awesome. So appreciate all you guys. Make sure to check it out, and we'll look forward. Aaron and I will be here with you guys tomorrow. Immediately following the game, we'll jump on and have our post-game show and hopefully be celebrating the Bills win.
Nate, what about you, brother?
For me, you can follow me on Twitter at Nate Geary Sports. Yeah, same. Thanks everybody for hopping in. I enjoyed doing this. Obviously, Sabres play today, so I had some free time to hop in on this Saturday morning, drink some coffee, talk some ball. Love doing it, boys.
Thanks, Nate. Appreciate you joining us. AJ, let everyone know where they can find you, what you got going on. The Senior Bowl. I know you're excited to get down there with us. What's going on this week for you?
Yeah, so the Twitter handle's right there. AJ Sabalski, at AJ Sabalski. Yeah, I'm excited to join you guys, and I'm looking forward to going down to the Senior Bowl. I'm doing all the Senior Bowl write-ups for you guys right now, so to get an idea of, kind of who we're talking to when we get down there. So Really looking forward to it, and, I appreciate you having me on, and it's awesome seeing, all the Bills Mafia in the chat this morning.
All right, guys, great show, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and until next week, we'll see you later.